Hello everyone and welcome back to Almost There, a Twisted Tale novel here on Disney Magic Zach. I am of course Zach, your host, and welcome to chapter 15. Now if you have missed any chapters, be sure to check out the playlist in the description down below. And let's jump into it. The Ninth Ward, New Orleans, Friday, February 1927, 4 days before Mardi Gras. Tiana lifted her favourite camel brown hat from the rack in the corner of her room and fixed it over her hair. She turned to the mirror and frowned. "You look like you're off to shovel manure in this get-up," she said to the image staring back at her. She expelled a frustrated sigh as she tossed the hat onto the bed and went back to her chiff robe for what had to be the dozenth time this morning. There must have been something in there that would be appropriate for shopping at the most prestigious department store in all of New Orleans. Ah yes, this one should work. She pulled out her green and white polka dot dress with the satin ribbon that tied at the waist and the matching satin trim that ran along the hem of its ruffled skirt. She would normally only wear a dress like this to a wedding or an Easter Sunday, but if she was going on this outing with Lottie to Mason Blanche, she had to look the part of someone who belonged there, because she did belong there. She was just as good as anybody else who set foot in that establishment, and she was going to make sure everyone who was there knew it. China pulled the dress over her head and pinned the barrette Miss Rose had given her as a gift behind her ear. It had tiny gardenias attached to it, adding an elegant touch to her ensemble. She twisted around from left to right in the mirror, admiring the way her dress twirled about her legs. She stopped. "Wait," Tiana murmured. She stepped closer to the mirror and peered at the barrette. She could have sworn the two flowers on either side of the trinket had been buds, and while 4 of them were full gardenia blooms. She must have been mistaken about the buds. Had to have been, but she had specifically remembered those buds. She remarked on how pretty they would be if they could bloom. She shook her head. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe she bought a second barrette and had forgotten about it, or perhaps someone had switched them on her. With shaking hands, she slowly slipped the barrette out of her hair and returned it to the jewellery box. She tried her best to ignore the uneasiness that continued to build within her gut. Jana closed her eyes tight and sucked in several deep breaths. When she opened them, all would be okay. She popped her eyes open and forced herself to smile at her reflection. "See, everything is fine. You're just tired." She looked back at the clock on her bedside table and realised if she didn't get going she would be late. When she walked into the kitchen she was greeted with a surprised murmur from her mother, who sat behind a sewing machine. "Well, look at you," Eudora said, after removing the needle she had sandwiched between her lips. "You're dressed pretty fancy for making fried chicken and jambalaya, aren't you?" "I'm not going to the restaurant just yet," Tiana said. She drew a cup of water from the tap and leant against the counter as she took a sip. She stood up straight. "Wait, where's Daddy?" "He went out to Jefferson Parish to look at some gardening equipment. He said to tell you he'll be back by this afternoon to start preparing for the Mardi Gras weekend kick-off." Eudora threaded a second needle with purple thread. "I should have the last one of these done just in time." Her mother had spent the past week making tablecloths in the traditional Mardi Gras colours as part of the decoration for the supper club's weekend-long celebration. China couldn't wait to see how they would look. Eudora glanced at Tiana. "You didn't tell me why you're all dolled up." Tiana finished her water, rinsed the cup in the empty sink and returned it to the cupboard. "I'm going over to the bus, and then Charlotte and I are going to Maison Blanche." Her mother's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, you've got Maison Blanche money now." "I'm not planning on buying anything," Tiana assured her. "I'm only going with Lottie because she invited me." "Well, you have been working hard. You deserve to treat yourself to something from the department store." Eudora pushed away from her sewing machine and came around the table. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a $5 bill. $5, Tiana cried. She backed away when her mother tried to hand her the money. Didn't I just say that you deserve to treat yourself? Go on and buy yourself something fun." Tiana shook her head. "No way, Mama. I'm not wasting $5 whole on foolishness." "It's not foolishness. What's the point of working so hard if you don't enjoy the fruits of your labour?" Eudora cut Tiana's cheeks with her hands. They were slightly callous from years of working with needle and thread. "I haven't said this enough lately, but I am so proud of all the work you've put into the supper club. Your daddy is too." A lump of emotion immediately formed in Tiana's throat. There were things in this world that meant more to her than making her parents proud. She closed her eyes and smiled, relishing the safety and comfort of her mother's tender touch. "Thank you, Mama." She opened her eyes. "But I'm still not taking your $5. She slipped out of her mother's hold and quickly made her way to the front door. "Tell Danny I'll meet him at the restaurant later." "Tiana," her mother called, her hands on her hips. Love you, Mama. Tiana blew her a kiss before grabbing her purse and leaving the house. Tiana headed south towards the river this time, opposite her usual route. That way she could hop onto the St. Charles Avenue streetcar line, which would take her directly to the LaBeouf mansion. She greeted neighbours while simultaneously calculating the various tasks she had to complete before that night's special dinner service. The streetcar pulled up to the stop just as Tiana arrived. Hey there, Tiana, the streetcar operator greeted. Heard you got a big name playing at your restaurant tonight. I sure do, she answered as she slid a nickel into the box. She spoke loud enough for everyone to hear everyone on the streetcar to hear. Ruby Davis is kicking off Mardi Gras weekend at T&J's Supper Club. Make sure you stop on by once your work day is done. Tana smiled as she heard murmurs of excitement while she made her way to the back. She took an empty seat on the side that faced the river, and was immediately taken aback by the thick greyish cloud that hovered over the water, even thicker than yesterday. There might have been something to Councilman Du Bois' theory that this peculiar fog was coming from the river. Tana put her chin in her upturned palm and marvelled at the activity buzzing along the riverfront. Despite the lingering mist, she could make out the fishermen casting wire nets off the pier that stretched along the banks of the Mississippi River. She and her nanny made a trip to the same pier at least once a week, making deals for fresh catfish, dreaming up new recipes. A medley of worry, alarm, and sheer rage bubbled up inside as she recalled Facilier's threat. To ignore it outright would be unwise, but she did not want to bow down to his whims either. She now recognised her folly. She had become too comfortable, foolishly trusting that a known conman would remain true to his words. She should have been expecting him to pull something like this all along. Well, it wasn't going to work. Unless he could give her a good reason to add that potion to everything she served at the restaurant, she wasn't going to do it. Who knew what was in this new version? If it was either the same magical concoction keeping her daddy alive, or something more nefarious. And who knew what else he would ask if she could find. Attempting to put Facilier out of her mind, she took in the sights and sounds of the city. The streetcar sailed past LaBeouf's enormous brick sugar mill. Plumes of white smoke bellowed from metal stacks, mixing in with the fog. As she stared at the deep red bricks of the mill, another unwelcome thought made its way to her mind. Was Amin somewhere inside? What was he doing? Was he considering asking her out for coffee again? Stop that, Tiana. She could not have coffee with him. She needed to focus on her future, and as much as she wished things could be different, Naveen was not and never could be part of it. She pulled her bottom lip between her teeth to stop it from quivering, cursing even that tiny display of weakness. The streetcar rolled along St. Charles Avenue, past the imposing homes that lined the wide boulevard. Tiana couldn't imagine what it would be like to live in one of these, despite the fact that she'd been a frequent guest at the largest one in the city since childhood. Even at a young age, she noticed that the people who looked like her never lived in these houses. They only cleaned them or provided some kind of service. Her youthful mind thought it was happenstance. But as she got older, Tiana gradually became aware of the disparities between how the black people who lived in Treme and the Ninth Ward, and even the poor white people living in the tenement buildings were treated, compared with those who lived uptown. She would ask Mama about it. After hearing her say, "It's just the way things are," so many times, Tiana stopped asking. Tiana always wished she could do something to help end those disparities. When the streetcar pulled up in front of LaBeouf's large white mansion, Tiana bade farewell to the conductor and climbed down the steps. She waited for several Model Ts to drive past. They were common in this more affluent part of the city, before she crossed the busy street and entered through the heavy wrought iron gate. New Orleans was home to many grand residences. There was none more magnificent than the two-story Greek revival home that Eli LaBeouf had commissioned, right in the heart of the city's garden district. Stately columns surrounded the wraparound porch, each archway adorned with ornate ironwork. The house, with its intricately carved trib and elaborate front door, was a work of art. Tia! Tia looked up to find Charlotte waving at her from the second-floor balcony. Feathers from the fluffy pink plumes that lined the edges of the silk dressing gown she wore flittered to the ground. "I'll be right down," Charlotte said. "I just need a minute to finish getting dressed." Shaking her head with a small laugh, Tiana didn't bother to point out to Lottie that she was the one who had said to be here at 10 a.m. sharp. She had known her friend long enough to understand that 10 a.m. in Charlotte's time meant no sooner than 10:30 a.m. to everyone else. She entered the house and was instantly pummeled by Stella, Charlotte's gentle giant of a hound. She hunched to the ground and rubbed the dog behind both ears. "How's it going, girl? You mind telling your mama to hurry it up?" Stella's tail waggled back and forth as she looked excitedly at Tiana. "Stella doesn't have to tell me anything because I'm ready," Charlotte said. Tiana looked towards the top of the gargantuan staircase. Lottie descended the steps, wearing a pristine white suit with a form-fitting skirt and a wide-brim hat. Tiana knew she made the right choice in choosing the green and white polka dot dress. Well, come on, let's get going, Charlotte said, putting her arm through Tiana's, as if she hadn't been the one who left Tiana waiting. Tiana had to hand it to her. Only Lottie had the charm to get away with such things. They exited through the front door and walked to a car idling at the curb. 10 minutes later, the car pulled up to the multi-story department store in the heart of downtown. If the prime Canal Street location wasn't enough to convince people of its prominence, Mason Blanche's towering white edifice, with its lofty columns and fancy carvings, would. Tiana tampered down the bit of nerves, then suddenly tried to surface. This wasn't her first time shopping here. She and her mother frequented Krauss department store a few blocks away because of their fabric selection, but she'd come to Mason Blanche with Daddy a few months ago to buy a present for Mama's birthday. She just knew that shopping here was a completely different experience for her than for her friends. I know exactly what I want, Charlotte said as they walked through the door. Well, I know the exact colours I want. I'm thinking something violet and maybe a blush, pink. Ooh, and midnight blue. She led Tiana to the gown section and proceeded to run the shop attendants ragged as they catered to her every whim. Tiana was mindful of a shop attendant who lurked near the display of rayon stockings. The woman had been watching her like a hawk from the moment they arrived. Charlotte emerged from the changing room wearing a sparkly navy blue flapper dress with crystal embellishments along the neckline. What about this one, Tia? She asked, turning left, then right in front of the mirror. That dress was made for dancing, Tiana replied. Yeah, but it's missing something. Charlotte marched to the row of mannequins and lifted a navy gloss from one of them. She tugged the tight-fitting hat over her bouncy blonde curls. You know, I actually think this would be better on you, she said. Charlotte tried to fit the hat on Tiana's head, but she moved out of the way. Lottie, no, Tiana said. Yet the lurking shop attendant had already noticed. She rounded the display case and rushed to where Charlotte and Tiana stood. Excuse me, she cannot try on the merchandise, the woman stated. Lottie looked at her. Why not? We're shopping. She cannot try on the merchandise, the woman repeated, her voice even harder, colder. It's store policy. Lottie plopped down on her hip, but Tiana intervened before she could say more. It's okay, Lottie. No, it is not. Ma'am, if you do not calm down, we'll have to ask you to leave, the attendant said. Excuse me, Charlotte asked. Do you know who my daddy is? Tiana took Charlotte by the hands. We're leaving, she said. Charlotte wrenched her hand away. We are not. We have every right to be here, and you have every right to try on whatever you want. Charlotte, please, Tiana hissed. Let's just go, please. It must have been the plea in Tiana's voice that finally caught Lottie's attention, or maybe it was the use of her full name, something Tiana rarely did. Okay, she said with a nod. We'll leave. She took her nose up in the air in the most Charlotte way possible and marched into the changing room. She came out in a few minutes later dressed in a white suit. I will never, ever step foot in this store again, Charlotte said. Tiana did her best to keep her own head held high as she followed Lottie out the department store. When she slid into the back seat of the car, the adrenaline released from her body in a rush. Her hands shook. The nerve of that woman, Charlotte huffed. We shouldn't have left here. In fact, Jefferson, turn the car around. No, Tiana said. No, Lottie. I'm not going back there. You can't let people tell you what you can and cannot do. I never back down from. I can't do what you do, Tiana said. She fisted her hands in her lap, fighting for control over her emotions. She hated this feeling, and she resented Charlotte for putting her in this position, even if her friend's heart was in the right place. At the moment, they felt worse than Dr. Facilier's magic bind. You don't understand, Tiana said. They can forbid me from trying on the merchandise. If I don't comply, they can call the authorities. That's my reality. But it doesn't have to be that way. But it is, Tiana said. Who knows? Maybe one day I will be able to try on that hat at Mason Blanche. But today is not that day. And not that store, Lottie said. Never that store, Tiana reiterated. She paused. I do appreciate you for standing up for me that way. I will always stand up for you, Tia, Charlotte said, grabbing her friend's hand. But as the car moved through the city, they both fell into silence, wrapped up in their own thoughts.